Fiber Forum this morning. We have Stanford de Jong that will present on and looks at the challenges in building maps of South Africa and the many different fiber networks, reveals some interesting facts about the concentration and coverage of networks across the nation. Stanford? Stanford de Jong has more than 2.5 decades in the geospatial industry, and he's still going strong. Welcome this morning.
Barely going strong. Good morning all. Lovely to see all these faces. I know a couple of them, which is pretty great. And nice to meet you in person. Thank you for attending this morning. And there we go. I wanted to know where that is. The funny thing is, there was beers for peers today, or last night, should I say. I was just wondering, what's the turnout going to be like? Even with a good turnout, which is a good turnout, you go to sleep and you wake up and your Garmin tells you that you've had a pathetic sleep. So I've got a sleep score which is useless. But there we go. That's technology influencing even your sleep these days. Right. Who am I? There we go. My name is Stanford from 28 East. We're a geospatial company. And we are also a Google Maps partner, but we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about some of the analysis that we are able to perform geospatially in order to understand what is going on in the F&O markets. Having said that, there are some important distinctions to make and in some important understandings of the data before understanding the analysis. So that's what essentially I'm going to be touching on, is understanding what data we have analyzed and as a result, what are the results. But I can't go on without actually just touching on some of the interesting technologies, Google technologies out there that we can rely on, make use of in the markets and get ISPs to make use of as well. So immersive maps, and I love this one. We had a bit of our developers doing some immersive mapping, and here comes 28 East in the aeroplane down to Cape Town. It's the wrong route, I realize that, but anyway, we can't all be, we don't know the flight paths down into Cape Town International Airport. But anyway, that's us, and that is some of the immersive mapping that we can make use of as solutions for internet service providers. I wish there was some dramatic music for this. Wouldn't that be nice? But there isn't. And in addition to, okay, it looks like we're going to have to get to the end of the little video before I can go to the next one. So I think you get it. The next one is optimization, route optimization, useful for internet service providers, optimizing and optimizing routes for technical teams, for example, distributing and getting technical teams to and from sites, operational sites. That is a Google optimization tool that we can make use of. Advanced markers as well. Just interesting that at a particular point, we can actually introduce some customized labeling. There is also, from a Google perspective, something called, a big focus on environmental. And this is one of the little, we call it the Solar API, which is probably quite useful for internet service providers, understanding, power is a driver, and the understanding of solar potential for particular sites is useful for service providers, and an API that can be relied on also from Google. But this is where we really want to focus our attention, and it's the ISPA Insights. Right, finally I've got a map and I feel a whole lot more comfortable as well. Ant has approached 28 East and they said, well, listen, you've got geospatial experience. Let's see what we can do with the data that we have access to. So what is the data that we have access to? access. I use that quite loosely, but because because we are an integrator of F&O network data, in order to allow a service provider to query an address and find out what service is available at that address or at that point on the map, a pin on the map, we have access to the F&O data. Not all of the data, it is only client or data that should we say, data that are part of the underlying service that we offer to ISPs. So the ISPs will sell on a service provider, on a provider. We have that data. So a service provider can say, oh, okay, what is the address? And hence we do a geospatial query behind the scenes and identify whether there is a service in a particular area. By aggregating that data, we then are able to make use of that data source to do this analysis. So what we have for the spatial analysis, we have the footprints in polygons, lines as well. And then to make sense of the footprints, I mean, we could just map out the footprints and look where there would be colorful spots, as you can see on the map. But that really doesn't make sense because that's just a footprint, and so what? What does that actually represent? Or how do you take that analysis further? You take that analysis further, the answer is by introducing data such as, what's ubiquitous in South Africa as far as data goes that we could make use of? And he's miming the word right here. Thanks, Ant. Census data. So we match, well, no, we don't match at all. We mix, we layer. We layer the census data, which was over the entire South African extent, and we overlay the fiber network operator's footprint on top of the census data and extract further information, which is interesting. Well, should we say the interesting part of that is we, in terms of analyzing or extracting out as much information as possible, we've made use of the areas of the census boundaries. Okay, so the census boundaries are enumeration areas. They roll up into larger and larger and larger areas, all quite nicely nested, so it's quite nice and neat data. And we have decided to use something called the subplace, which is essentially the suburbs, and it's most people understand a suburb, like, okay, I'm in Irene and at the offices, and I know the more or less the extent of Irene, and you kind of like got a concept of understanding, spatial understanding. So we used the subplace and the area of the subplace, and we intersected the footprints of the fiber network operator with the area of the subplace. And that's the initial basis of the analysis that we did. And that introduces some interesting insights, but there's a cautionary tale there as well. And the cautionary tale is, you could probably spot a couple of the cautionary tales in this diagram that you see, well, actually in the map that you see in front of you. So, the map that we have in front of us, first of all, there we go, 37.4% of South Africa is covered by fiber based on area. Okay, based on area, that's the important thing. It is not 37.4% of South Africa is covered in terms of population densities or anything like that. Okay, so it's not on the population, though there can be some interpretation because we've used the census numbers in that. Okay, so what do we have here? No, actually maybe I'll take a step back, or should I take a step forward? Let's just change that view. Okay, so I think everyone would probably instinctually know that areas like the Western Cape and Gauteng have a large number of operators in that area, in that space, and it is true. Gauteng, 86.13% of the physical area is covered or intersected by a network, by a footprint, by some sort of provider. Um, in this particular diagram, I'm going to now just dive into a little bit more of the details. On the right, can you actually, you can maybe just see that. The darker colors, 7 providers right at the bottom of the legend. You can see Central Gauteng, Joburg, Pretoria area, at least covered with at least 4 provider options or choices, I suppose. And then there is a cautionary tale there, so I'm going to just remember that. So Gauteng, 86.13, and we go to where we are at the moment. Western Cape, does that look kind of like, if you had to see that, the map there, you can see the dark colors representing high numbers of providers deep in the Western Cape. On the borders on the Eastern Cape there as well, seems to be quite a lot of activity, 3 providers. Does that kind of resonate with expectations? I would imagine so. Right, from well-serviced areas to very unserviced areas. And unfortunately, we've got little Eastern Cape sitting there with not too much options as far as providers go. So ISPA have the detailed information behind all of these maps. There is a marketing brief that's going out today, this morning. So their insights, or the additional analysis, is going to be published. I'm not even too sure on what platform, but there we go, press release. And we do have it's not unfortunate, it's the reality that we have certain areas of the country that are underserviced, and we've got Eastern Cape as particularly underserviced, which is interesting because we've got a lovely client who has established a very small ISP just outside East London, and he's got a fantastic story about building out an ISP from a one-man band, which is a fabulous story, and in an underserviced area, so he's almost got a captive market. Right, so to understand the data, and I'm actually getting to the end of my little presentation. So here we can see one, they say, oh, goodness gracious, now what on earth is going on here? Because here we've got, to the west of Klerksdorp, Klerksdorp is that little dot on the east side there. On the west side, no, sorry, it's right in the center of this particular map. What on earth is going here? Here we have a rural area in Klerksdorp with a massive number of providers, and this is where the cautionary tale comes in. No, there's not 7 providers, or at least 4 providers in this rural area. There's a combination of data issues that we get to that is unfortunate, gives you just a bit of a skewed picture. In fact, in this case, a very skewed picture, where the combination of the large areas of the census data overlapped with the network operators introduced a display back or a result of an analysis that is incorrect. And that is due to, in part, the census data polygons, and in part to the fiber network operators' data. We don't clean the data, we don't manipulate the data, we receive that data in, I'd say 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10 in the KML file format, and we are overlapping those KML files. Now, KML files is it's a blessing and a curse, I've got to be honest. It's a blessing in that they are ubiquitous, it's used in this particular industry a lot. However, it's really just a display. There's no spatial topology built into it. That's a big geospatial word, which helps improve the accuracy of the data. So we're overlapping many layers or KML files on top of the spatial data, and we've got what we call these slivers, we've got these overshoots, we've got these undershoots that presents itself in the data. So in the middle of Klerksdorp there, there would be, well, there are footprints of at least 4 operators. But because those little boundaries creep into the urban areas, or at least that very large rural area, it then transfers that data or that understanding into the large rural polygon, census polygon. So, cautionary notes. You can't take these maps as is. And this is just a little bit of the more detailed example. It might be a little bit of a messy slide, but it is saying that there are cases in points where we're overlapping the footprint data from the FNOs, and we get 63 overlapping instances of the data. Crazy. That's a whole lot of another policy discussion. It is a data issue, and it's probably an item of discussion that ISPA would have to address, which I'm looking forward to hearing about. So just as an aggregator of the data, this is what 28 East are involved in. What do we do? What is the value proposition of using 28 East in order to do a feasibility query at an address, at a point on the map? Is behind the scenes, our little data warriors are requesting, receiving KML files. KML files is great because it's ubiquitous, as I said, but I was hearing horror stories even last night about using KMLs in network management and understanding straight line networks, and if you don't get it right, you can be kilometers away from your town, village, or address. And those designers who are unfamiliar with scale can get it horribly wrong, and we do see that. But 28 East do not edit that. We use it as is. CSV is points and polygons, or points shape files, which is at least at a file format, and it's a geospatial file format. It's also a little bit old these days, but there is something called topology, which helps to define logic built into the shape, the spatial feature. We love those geodatabases as well. We've actually even taken images, snapshots, and lines drawn on snapshots. I mean, lines hand drawn onto images, and we've had to use that as a data source. Can you imagine the amounts of error and inaccuracies that we introduce into the FNO footprint data, if you wish, and how that is the repercussion of that comes through in the analysis. As we go forward, I think there's this tendency to make use of API access to spatial data, and we will see probably more of that. Really, and that is, beautifully, my little story. And here's my little chappie who has a question for me. Do you know him? Have you seen him? No? Yes? Where do you know him from? Well, maybe you would have, but he certainly is a train spotter, and that's his train spotting face, and I thought it was a brilliant train spotting face. And that was my closing slide, and that was my question slide. So, over to you. Any questions? I actually can hear a cricket in the corner. I really can. Okay, I've got a question. Can I have a question? My question to the audience and ISPA as well is, so what else could we do with the data? Right. And that's the question I'd love to hear from you guys. So awesome that you brought that one up. The additional work we would love to see is the fact that the footprints change almost weekly. So what you see here is a snapshot in time, and happens to be in November last year. But that changes, and we know that every week there's a weekly update, small as it is. But I would love to see that mapping as an ongoing process, and seeing or monitoring the change in the footprint penetration into, rural areas in particular, but I'd love to see that happen. So, and that can happen. So that's one of the nice questions that I would that I have now addressed, and hopefully satisfied your query as well. Anything else?
Hi, there you go. Okay, Graham here from the internet. I had a question which you kind of answered already about, I mean, looking particularly at the national map, there was a lot of rural areas that showed a provider, and I know that there's no infrastructure in those areas. So, I mean, you're mapping it onto census areas. That's principally why it's showing up. Is that what you're saying? I mean, in the Eastern Cape, for example, I mean, there's fibre in the metros. There is no fibre beyond about 20 kilometres out of the metros. So you've got like a 50-kilometre radius showing up there. Is that purely the census boundaries, or?
No, that is actually a very good point, is that we mapped what we have access to. So the important consideration for this analysis was what 28 East has access to, and it was open fibre only. So there may be closed fibre routes in there as well, but we only mapped what we have and open fibre. So it might be that we don't have access to that footprint, and hence we can't map it.
So what I'm suggesting is that what you're showing there is not real. And I suspect that some of the data you have has aspirational coverage rather than real coverage.
Yeah.
And I think maybe as an ISPA discussion, what is the definition of coverage? Because, I mean, I've seen some of the maps that some of the FNOs put on their websites, which includes lots of aspirational coverage, lots of like blankets an entire an entire district as having coverage when they actually only have a pop in town, and they can do 5 kilometers around the pop in town. So I think that's the one concern about kind of just looking at the data and going, lots of people have got coverage already, and I think the reality is a lot less. The other thing that I noticed about the data was that you showed a lot of places where people have 7 options, and I was wondering how you got to that. Is that an individual at a specific location has 7 options, or are they just 7 options that are present in that polygon?
Yeah, exactly. It's your point 2 there, or your latter point, is if we had a polygon and there was an operator on the east side, west side, and a little intersect, so a tiny little sliver of intersects, we count that as operator 1, operator 2, operator 3. So that's how we got to that 7, yes. And that's how we counted it. But what an addition to that is that we can't actually say that operator 2 at the top on the north is actually correctly positioned. So it might be more north or might be more south, and we don't have any control over that particular line. But it had to be counted because it is there in our footprint data set.
Yeah, I mean, I think practically the reality of what's on the ground is that I don't know of too many places where there's more than 2 options realistically for home users. And then obviously there's the distinction between home services and business services, which also need to kind of be looked at separately, because you certainly can't go to one of the FTTB ISPs and go, please plug in my house, because they might laugh at you, or they might just send you a quote that you're going to fall over. And so it's a good starting point. I think that's taking that data wider and potentially like putting it in front of policymakers and things, it's a bit premature, because it creates an impression that we are a lot further along than I think we are in reality.
Yeah, and I think, well, exactly that, but I also don't want to throw out the baby with the water. So I think you're right, it is a starting point, and it's been acknowledged as a starting point. And by addressing the complications of that data, if you address those complications, you kind of realize with circumspect or with caution that you address that image as is. Thanks for those comments, On switch, the on switch. Yeah. Oh, here we go.
Good morning, William Stuckey, independent consultant. I have a very similar question. What do you define as coverage? If there's a piece of fiber here, whether it's backhaul fiber or whatever, how do you define that there is coverage here or there or not there?
We define it by what the KML is telling us. So the KML from the fiber network operator is what we've mapped, and if it is on the left-hand side of the street, that is our definition of their footprint.
So it's their data.
It's their
They
data.
are claiming
We
that they
do
have
not
coverage.
touch their data. We do not touch it. We do not modify it. We do not add it into a geodatabase and introduce ideas of topology where there shouldn't be overlaps, there shouldn't be slivers, there shouldn't be overshoots in the data, undershoots in the data, which all contributes to spurious data sets. So it is exclusively what we get from the fiber network operator.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then Graham's point of aspirational maps may well be the case.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Point taken. Come on, Mark.
I'm saying, so if you're, I mean, I'm an F&O, so on the route, what you're not depicting is the accessibility to that fiber. And that's probably what your point is. So if it's an NLD route, or these are not accessible to anything that's going past that until it reaches a town or somewhere it can spur off. So that overlapping is what's happening, but it's not accessible. So should it be counted as a coverage?
Yeah, no, I suppose that is a good point. And initially it is, if it is presented to us as a footprint, we are going to treat it as such and exclude some business logic that comes into access to a network. That accessibility can be built into feasibility, but as part of a business rule from the customer, as opposed to true accessibility. Thanks, Mark.
Sort of just tying together some of the questions here. There's F&Os in the room. What advice would you give them about how they should provide you with data to serve your customers better, which is ultimately their customers?
Yeah.
What should that data look like?
Yeah, that's a good one and a tricky one, because I don't want to put my foot in it. But as I said, those KMLs are ubiquitous. They're easy to use. They come from all the F&Os. And I'm from a geospatial background, and I believe that an ideal approach would be to have a geodatabase. So it's a database that understands, it sounds a bit conceptually warped, but understands that I'm on the left-hand side of the road, I'm on the right-hand side of the road, I'm overlapping or I'm snapping to a particular line segment, and there is something called topology that is built into the data repository, into the database. So that would be my option number one for any ISP to actually make use of geospatial databases to capture the network footprint, and which in turn allows for the combination, or at least the addition or aggregation, should we say, aggregation of the network operator's data into a single data repository that has these rules built into it. And we can see that we don't have all these KMLs sitting on top of each other, all higgly-piggly, as spaghetti or as overlaps, and we can trim that spaghetti mess out and have a single line. Single line represents maybe 2 or 3 operators as an attribute to that line. So that would be my great ambition for any F&O, is to make use of geospatial concepts such as a topologically correct database. Thanks for that.
Hey, Joe from Atomic.
Hi, Joe.
touching on that point about 7 coverage or 7 options in one area, so can you differentiate between FTTH and FTTB, the sort of easy option to get access to a home versus the long formal quote process?
No, answer is no.
Okay. Because what I'm interested in is, of the FTTH areas, what percentage have more than one option?
Yeah, okay, so that would be a continuation of the analysis, which we haven't actually done. So we aggregated all together B and H, and that could be an extension of this analysis, ISPA's analysis, is to separate out B and H. So we could do that, yeah. Thanks. Alrighty. Well, with the sleep score of only 59, I feel quite chirpy about this, I've got to be honest. And I think, thank you very much. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Next, we have the future of fiber panel discussion. Can I invite the panel members up, please? First, we have David Coleman from Frogfoot, data analytics and data science professional with more than 20 years experience in credit risk management, predictive analytics, data management, data science, and product development. He has served various industries, amongst others, banking, finance, services, retail, online gaming, and telecommunications sector across sub-Sahara Africa and the Middle East. Welcome. Second, we've got Mike Silber from Liquid Telecoms. Mike is the Chief Regulatory Officer of the Liquid Intelligence Technologies Group, a lawyer and ISPA fanboy, having been an ISPA regulatory advisor and board member. He currently does various things to try and make the internet a better place. Mike tries very hard to make law, regulations, and policies not so boring, and in his own words, he sometimes succeeds. Mike. There you are. Mark O'Donoghue from Link Africa. Mark has been in the ICT sector for over 25 years. Are you okay? He is currently works at Chief of Sales at Link Africa, a South African-based F&O with international ambitions. Christian Woods from Metro Fiber. Christian is the Chief Commercial Officer of Metro Fiber Networks, and he is accountable for all revenue-generating business. Jan Vermeulen from My Broadband. He's the editor of My Broadband, the largest tech news website. He has a degree in computer engineering from the University of Pretoria and has always had a love of writing, with dreams that he would be living out the 1995 occult film Hackers. He joined My Broadband in 2010 as a junior journalist. The real work of journalism has a rude awakening, but he fell in love with it in any way, and it's been 14 years of history. Anton Kotze from Ellipsis. Anton is an admitted attorney with over 20 years of post-admission experience. He is a director of Ellipsis Consulting, law firm MCK Inc., and providing legal and regulatory services to the telecommunications sector. Anton currently serves as a regulatory advisor to the Internet Service Providers Association with Dominique Cole. Welcome, everybody. Am I in your way? Not yet. If you wouldn't mind, I'll kick off the first question from the Operators Working Group. Sol Stein asked, everyone expects internet costs to decrease, yet year on year the F&O's prices increase, justified by an increase in speed. This means that the ISP also have to charge more due to delivering more bandwidth. We have that most people have enough bandwidth at home and would rather keep the same speed for a smaller increase. Why the drive to push up the price and speed when you should be getting volume breaks to pass on to the consumers? Who would like to answer this question?
Take
Thanks,
a stab,
Mark.
thanks. Look, I mean, the prices generally, and we are seeing it in the media, the company I work for hasn't increased for a while, a couple of years. But, I mean, I'm going to put this down to generally that the cost to service from the F&O side is definitely increasing significantly. We understand that the optic layer, there's been huge progression in the amount of bandwidth that can be delivered over the same fiber, but the actual physical layer, or the layer 1 portion, to service, to keep uptime, to stave off load shedding. And one of our big cost increases that we've seen massively is the actual physical security of our staff in mainly KZN. We're up to nearly R1 million a month now just on physical security, where people have to be escorted by armed security forces with automatic weapons just to go into the rural areas. So these costs are coming through to us constantly. The ability for us to keep our network up due to load shedding is also another factor that we've had to put into the running of our business. And generally, when you look at how the companies that have tried to keep the pricing down, etc., what has been the impact to the service delivery? The ability to actually keep that fiber alive, the turnaround times, the ability to meet an MTTR. This requires people. This is physical hands. And we constantly are being pressurized and paying for things that quite technically we shouldn't be paying for, quite frankly. I mean, we shouldn't be having to do so much uptime on generators and batteries, and we should not be having to pay armed security to go and deliver and fix a fiber in a remote area. That's costing us now, we're a small company, R1 million extra a month. Where does that go? We would shut down if we didn't eventually put our pricing up. So the optics layer is the easy one. You've got all these, we've been watching this for the last 3 days, just how much bandwidth we can be pushing over these fibers now. So that's why the offset happens at the increase of bandwidth level.
Thank you very much.
Well, can I maybe offer an additional perspective, which is maybe because people actually underpriced as part of the land grab, and people went in at pricing that was not commercially viable in order to actually get uptake of fiber, and now the market grab is coming home to roost, and people are realizing they're having to raise their prices to actually be commercially viable. And the only way to soften the blow, in much the same way as when people pack your ketchup in a smaller bottle for the same price, is you can't pack your packets in a smaller bottle. So what you do is you tell the consumer, we're charging you more, but wow, look, we're giving you greater speeds or greater capacity to try and soften the blow. But I think that the comment from the operator working group is correct. Most people have enough bandwidth. But really, this is the F&Os trying to give the consumer something rather than just a price increase with no perceived benefit coming across.
Anel, I think this is a topic that deserves multiple answers. I think it's a hot topic, so maybe let me give my view. And 2 points. I think you're right. I think we as F&Os were quite aggressive at some point. And with all costs going up, interest rates going up,
I think it's exactly that. The payback is not where it should be, and therefore increase of prices at a reasonable level, and we also pushed it out for as long as possible, is I think natural. And I think we are an industry for decades actually. There was only one way, which is prices should reduce, right? Any other industry, it's absolutely accepted that prices increase. And even in close to our industry, all the over-the-top players like Netflix increases prices. Are we speaking about it? I just got an email from Google yesterday actually that my prices go up as a person. I'm not speaking about it apart from here. That's accepted. But if we as an industry increase prices for internet access, which is a utility these days, people are speaking about it like, how can you? I think we must also be real about it. And then maybe one, and I'm sure you hear my accent, in Europe, there are a lot of discussions about net neutrality and over-the-top players versus the telco players that put billions of euros there in the ground. And I think also regulation now comes to, at least in Europe, comes to a point to say, yeah, maybe we need to actually also give some space and some room to breathe for the telco players that actually invest billions to make broadband possible. And a lot of over-the-top players are just free riding. So this debate, I think we don't have yet in South Africa, but maybe it's also time to have it. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, if I may, on this. The minimum price for suburban networks seems to be 500 to 600 rand. What's informing that? Like, what's the minimum ARPU that's needed to actually, make the business profitable and sustainable and successful? That's obviously the suburban networks, and then how much of an impact do the high-density, low-income urban areas have? The ARPUs there are obviously much lower. I think that would also be quite interesting, because it seems it's not that the prices necessarily go up, it's that the minimum price just stays at the same level, which is 500 to 600 rand.
So I think it comes down to density, and so what that means is essentially our ARPUs or our IRR that we've deemed to be feasible comes down to where we're actually putting the fiber in. So this is why there's so much overbuild at the moment, is people are now seeing that you have to have a concentration of X to be able to make that backhaul fiber viable. So what we're seeing is, on average, if we were to be the only provider in a shopping center, and regardless of whether you have 3-4 providers in a shopping center, the maximum uptake in that shopping center is about 34%, 35%. Everybody else, so your anchor tenants, your Woolworths, your Checkers, all of these guys, they will now purchase your Ethernet layer, your more expensive. You're all backhauling on the same, routes, if I can put it that way, whether you're going into a GPON or is what is it's being determined actually by what is the business willing to pay. And even when you go into the other 60-odd%, that's all sitting on the mobile networks. That's all being taken up by $2.99, $1.99 packages, because all of these shops essentially just need a POS that is working off a 5G or a 4G SIM. So we actually get no traction in that. So we don't have, the numbers work out that you're not going to go above 34, maybe 40% if you're lucky, inside a shopping center that has a high density. So what the maths then comes down to number of shops and what is the backhaul cost, and it's all averaging out at about 500, 600. Just a note on this, the 500, 600 is now actually becoming even a standard for some of the largest retailers in the country. I go back 25 years in this industry, and 20 years ago at Dimension Data IS, I was selling to some of the largest retailers 25,000 Rand a month per link, okay, per link into stores, 1,500 stores, 2,000 stores across the country. Now these same businesses that have got a set revenue at 25,000 Rand times 1,000 or 1,500 stores are now getting traded off at 600 Rand a store. What is the expectation of the industry? What is the expectation that an FNO can survive where they're asking, how is 600 Rand, is 600 Rand now too expensive to run a retail store that is sitting, so say they've got the option of 2 fibers, so they're going 600 Rand, 600 Rand, so it's 1,200 Rand. They put a little MicroTik device down, or an SD, if they want to go big, they go SD-WAN. It can cut over 2 FNOs, 2 separate routes. They've got the redundancy. I think people need to start thinking a lot longer term here is about the survivability of the FNO, because if the FNOs can't make it, no one's going to make it. The ISPs simply just won't make it. Where does it end?
If I could maybe just add something. So I think there's probably different dynamics. So I think in FTTH, it's definitely an inflationary environment that we're looking at. And as previous guys said, we are seeing that pressure coming through on the cost side for us. Sorry? Yeah. Better? Okay. Okay. But what we, as you know, from our side, what we're doing is we've got both a H as well as a fiber to the business operation. So I think what we're doing consciously is on the business side, you're seeing different dynamics. Actually, prices are coming down on that side. And you do have, from that perspective, as well as financing our expansion on the H side into the rural areas, there's a cross-subsidization factor you need to look at there. If you look at some of the studies we've done on the H side, where business cases used to be built on 50 to 60% penetration, if you now have, let's say, 3 operators in an area, you're probably looking at a terminal penetration of between 20 and 30%. And we know that in a lot of areas, we're looking at 4 to 5, then it drops to like 13 to 15%. So it's a viability issue.
Definitely an operational aspect to keep in mind. Anybody with questions?
Hi, my name's Alan Levine. I'm from Vanilla ISP. We work with half a dozen FNOs. I think there's a big aspect of admin that comes into price changes, whether it's the FNO or the ISP or the user. It affects everybody. It adds a huge overload. I'm not sure if you're taking that all into account. If the FNO's got good admin, then, you know, that's great. You've got capacity to add prices. But when line transfers are failing all over the place and it takes 3 weeks for responses on installations and stuff, I think it's a little bit maybe not the best time to do price changes in those days. The thing that concerns me the most as an ISP is that it's really the fiber industry against the mobile industry. And it's very easy for a single user to switch from fiber to mobile, especially with the prices coming down in mobile. The MVNOs and bigger data bundles are much more easily accessible and lower cost. And there's no fixed line fee. You're really paying the ISP only. So please, when you look at your price increases, let's work together, because it's us against them, and we're actually in the same boat, and we're the good guys. So just be careful of those guys.
Good morning, William Stuckey, independent consultant. Comparing 25,000 Rand 20 years ago to 600 Rand today is comparing apples with pears. The 600 Rand is provided over your own fiber. Previously, the 25,000 Rand was provided over Telkom's infrastructure, and most of the money went to them.
Just to Alan's point, I think the interchangeability with the mobile service and the fiber service is certainly what's driving the Competition Commission's concern in the Maziv matter before the tribunal. So it's a very valid point, and it's a point that the Competition Commission has taken up. And we'll see what comes out of the tribunal on that.
Maybe 2 points. So one was mobile versus fiber. I think it's a good point. For me, it is very, very clear that, and I worked 20 years on the mobile side. For me, it's very, very clear that for a static use case, so your home, your workplace, wherever you are static, I think in the long run, fiber is the superior technology. And I truly believe that we need to enable all the use cases, and the devices that gets added to your fiber at the home, in your home, is increasing every day with cameras, etc. So I think there are use cases that big pipes to the home are required, and this is seen across the globe. So, but there's also a very good use case for mobile. I mean, we all, when we are on the move, we have to have mobile. So I believe that will coexist. Honestly, I think for the ISPs, it's actually an opportunity to provide converged services more and more across mobile and fixed. That's what ISPs can do and bundle it. So I believe there is an opportunity of the two. Maybe let me respond to your admin point. I think you have a point, but honestly it's a bigger issue that we as an industry have, because I believe we are a tech industry, if you like, but our systems are not the greatest. I speak now for us, maybe for some others. I believe we can give much better customer service to our end customers together, but also integrating between F&O and ISPs much, much more, so that those price increases are no hassle for you. So I think if we want to provide superior customer service, we need to improve our systems so that the admin actually is no longer required, because it's automated and digitized. That's my point on that one.
If I can just respond, I don't think you're actually getting it. Vodacom's the most expensive mobile operator, so I'm not so, obviously the massive merger thing is a big competition thing, but Vodacom's the most expensive mobile operator. And MTN seems to be the closed fiber network. I don't think I get to see them very much, but they also have all kinds of MVOs on their mobile network. So, and we have RAID. So in a city environment, like my staff, the ones that won't come to work, they actually will prefer using a RAIN than a fiber. I pay for that. It freaks me out. I'm totally with you. Obviously, fiber's way better. You don't have to sell us on that. We know we're in the right space, but they're trying to get into our space, and they're succeeding. And I don't have a way to fulfill their needs using fiber. So you're not empowering us. I would much rather have 2 pieces of fiber going in for redundancy than have an LTE backup service. I don't want to have an LTE backup service. Not nearly as good. This overbuild idea, it's not an overbuild. It's competition. It's like, there's an opportunity. Vumatel's in that area. They really give terrible customer service. Let's go in there and grab that area, because there's a lot of money to be made there.
That's right, but still, I think the arguments are still valid, that we cannot sell at the cost and at the price that makes it impossible to invest further. So I believe just selling cheap is not the answer for the industry. So we need to be very clear that we have a superior product, and the superior product must come as a superior price. If not, the industry will go the wrong way. And that's exactly the point that has been made here. yes, I agree with you. Of course, mobile is a good alternative. As I said, I worked for both companies you mentioned. But at the end, fiber is superior, gives the better service, and we need to sell this service to our end customers and establish it in the market that there is a price to pay for this service. If not, we are going the wrong way.
Well, let me be contrarian again. So isn't the answer then to actually welcome consolidation in the industry, because the only thing that is going to provide an alternative is consolidation? And if consolidation is going to be necessary because you actually need to reduce some of the inefficiencies, you need to allow for cross-subsidization, then it means that if you're going to be pushing consolidation within the ISP and F&O space, then it means that the ability to object, or the intent to object to consolidation within the mobile and fixed space is reduced. But maybe that's the answer, is take out the inefficiencies by just integrating. Let the F&Os buy the ISPs, remove this whole open access concept that we've got, because that way you can actually push margins up. And those few ISPs who want to continue within their space can do so, but they're aware that they're going to be facing significant competition between bundled F&O ISPs that are squeezing every cent out of the ARPUs that they earn. Because otherwise, Alan's right, mobile will eat our lunch, because consumers largely focus on price before they focus on quality.
I think consolidation is going to happen anyway, whether we welcome it or not. I think there's a lot of players that don't have the scale and probably would have built on business cases that were based on wrong assumptions. And I think that's key to what you were saying about the underpriced model. I don't think it was on purpose. I think it was just business models that were perhaps overestimated the take-up they would have in a particular precinct. So I think that consolidation is going to happen. But I agree on one thing, and that is that you should sell on value, not only on price. I made a point at Stanford's event the other day that what ISPs are putting on line rentals now are less than what they put on a Telkom line when there was a margin squeeze complaint against Telkom. And both F&Os have gone in as cheap as possible, but ISPs are also competing on nothing else but price and not adding value. And that has two impacts. The first impact is that when the F&O has to pass cost increase through, whether we believe it's justified or not, the point is that the percentage of that cost increase basically is so big relative to the cost that the end user is paying the ISP that whole cost is passed through just like that. There's no scope to absorb it in anything. And it also, as a percentage of the price, becomes quite a big percentage. So if it's an 8% increase coming from the F&O, it's an 80% increase right through to the end user. And that is a downward trend that it's going to reach. I think it's already hit rock bottom, and I think it's going to crash. And those ISPs that cannot add value on top of the fiber's line, it's probably going to end up losing the race and losing out to the ISPs that can add value-added services to their bouquet of offering to the customer.
Hi, I'm Andrew from Afrihost. Are we expecting any F&Os to go under? Yes. And not necessarily be consolidated into things, but their networks simply being discarded and the coverage being reduced. Is the future just consolidation, or is there actually places where coverage is going to diminish?
Mike should probably pick this up. I don't want to speak for you, but that sounds extremely unlikely to me. If an F&O, and I'm now speaking not as a consumer representative, but as someone who's dealt with far too many liquidations in pyramid schemes in the past 2 years, watching the liquidation industry do its thing, the more likely outcome is that the asset goes on sale. And somebody picks up a fiber network for a song, and that might be a great thing. because it cuts the cost, right, for the guy who takes over that network. But it's far more complicated than that. So I don't want to speak too much for the guys to the right of me, because there's banks involved, there's loans that have to be repaid. So it might not be as simple as paying $1 for a nice, 2,000 kilometer fiber network and getting to sweat it. So, but the bottom line is that no, the fiber, I doubt that it'll be left in the ground to rot. Somebody will pick it up. You guys are welcome to take it from there. I have other comments, so I just want to put myself in the queue over there because I've got something to add and a question to ask.
Could I just chime in on that question quickly? I think that's overall, I agree with you that fiber networks that exist where the businesses have fallen apart will probably get recycled and go to a different operator, get rebuilt, reinvigorated. I think the corner case, which is maybe not as much of a corner case as we'd like, is that there are certain areas where the criminality, the mafias, and all the rest of it are making it so difficult to operate that there are areas that will potentially be abandoned over the next few years due to the criminality and the construction mafias. Potentially not a whole operator, but certainly areas of coverage have the potential of being lost through that in the coming years, I think.
Maybe on this, spot on. So we obviously, like most fiber network operators, are going in emerging markets, as we call it, and it's true. It's very, very hard to actually not to build, but to maintain the network, keep it up, and vandalism is real, and I think this is very unfortunate to see. Because this is exactly where the digital inclusion must happen, and it is not easy to maintain and to go deeper into the area. So to the previous question, I don't see any risk that any consolidation will lead to less coverage, definitely not. But this, what you are raising, it's another root cause that I think is something we need to address, and we need to educate, and we need to explain, and we need to work with the communities to improve the situation, clearly.
Yeah, so just on that, our largest fiber network sits in KZN. We have acquired network elsewhere across the country, but where we started, where we physically built, and where we extended into were rural areas of KZN, which, quite frankly, when you mention the construction mafia, this is what we deal with daily. It's gotten to the point where they've arrived at our offices with AK-47s, put staff in boardrooms, held them hostage, so they can see our books to see where we're rolling out and why we're not actually using them, or their staff. So you can't even use your own staff. You have to outsource to their staff. And this is, quite frankly, this is run all by the taxi industries. The taxis have security companies that work for them. We have to hire those security companies to keep our staff or their staff safe. It just gets so convoluted and incredible because there's no fixed lines as to who owns which area, because during one fight during a weekend, somebody will have gained access to another area. So now you're working in an area that you thought was part of one consortium, or they call them, the word's gone out, forums. All the forums, thank you. And so these forums control an area. And if we're going to run a cable now 5 kilometers that goes through 3 different forum areas, we have to consult, we have to utilize staff, so we have to hand off staff to the next forum area and then the next forum area. And be very warned if you get it wrong. Your staff will have a gun to their head, your staff's vehicle will be stolen, and your staff's equipment will disappear. It is guaranteed. So these are costs now, because we have to have physical, as I mentioned, armed security with these gentlemen that we have to pay, private security. Police do absolutely nothing. The police are completely ineffectual. It's not even worth reporting or trying to even deal with it from a police perspective. It's gotten to that point. So we have to have staff who are employed who are elders in the communities to, be able to stave off certain situations or make sure that this is all running and free and flowing. So when a Vodacom tower goes down or an MTN tower goes down that we're servicing, there's a whole procedure in the area where you have to phone certain people to allow you in to go and fix it. And if the guy takes the phone call at 3 in the morning and goes back to sleep and doesn't tell the community that so-and-so is coming in to fix the fiber, it could be a situation where somebody is badly injured or dies.
Thank you. Gideon?
I have to choose between about 5 questions. So a simple leading one. Does anybody on the panel know of a concept called wholesale transfer pricing? Wholesale transfer pricing. Wholesale transfer pricing. Do you know the concept? Okay. That's basically, for anybody who don't know, it's the principle of where a supplier uses the market. Must have become a pop star. It's a concept where a supplier uses the marketing or the market power or the position of dominance to basically eat into the margin of their customer. Now, in this world, this is what's happening to ISPs. I think Alan or somebody tried to make the point that when you increase fiber prices, the ISPs need to go along with that. We have no choice. But you do not necessarily take into account that other costs for us increase potentially at a different proportion to what your costs have increased. And the reason I'm asking this is that in the end, are we heading for a situation where ISPs are actually irrelevant to the FNOs? Are we going to have a market that's, to get to Mike's point, vertically integrated and ISPs are considered to be irrelevant?
I definitely don't think so. It's definitely not our intention. We're still very much a champion of open access. So for us, ISPs, you play a very important role in terms of being that first line of engagement with the end consumer. I think we're very respectful of your role as there's like 2 degrees of separation between us and the end consumer actually. And that helps us a lot as well as in containing operational cost in terms of having to invest in lots of frontline support staff. I think there's the role that you play there. Also, I think the comment earlier around the value-added services, that's something that I think we depend on the ISP layer to play that retail shop front basically to the consumer. Our operation is a capital intensive operation. Capital is not cheap these days. It's not easy to come by. So our focus is on building networks, going for where we're going to get a good return with the tight capital that is available to us. So to me, definitely not the case that we are in any case or in any way in favor of any kind of vertical integration. I think you will note that from what's going on in the market currently, we're actually fighting that as well.
It's also, I negotiate contracts between FNOs and ISPs every day. And I've come to realize through this negotiation that there's a complete lack of understanding of the regulatory structure, which says that there's a network service provider and that you have a separate license for a network service license. and then there's an electronic communication service, or the ISP layer. And that these are not integrated layers, these are separate layers with separate licenses serving separate markets. The network player serves the ISP, and the ISP serves the end customer. But there's an identity crisis amongst ISPs and FNOs because they can't differentiate between that. I can see from the way that contracts are written is that the FNO thinks that they've somehow got some right and entitlement to the end user. But at the same time, the ISP often expects the FNO to deliver everything and just basically be a reseller. And that's also wrong. And until we understand that we are two different layers of a value chain, each with a specific aspect, that problem that you have is going to continue. And that's why I say, and it's wrong to say that the FNOs will disregard the ISPs. They're disregarding the ISPs because the ISPs, in a lot of instances, are simply saying, "I'll plug in at your I'll plug in at your peering point, or where we interconnect, and then you do everything for me." And that's not, that's not how it should be. The ISP should be, you're a provider of a network link, and I'm going to provide a service to my customer on top of that, and I'm going to provide a range of services on top of that. I think, unfortunately, because FNOs were really hard-pressed to get as much coverage on their networks as possible, as much take-up, they created what I call just add water models. So they created things like AEX, and they created things where it was really easy to start an ISP. You just had to sign a contract, plug in at a switch at Terraco, and there I've got an ISP. I'm on your portal, and the portal does my marketing for me. And that, unfortunately, has a long-term effect, and that long-term effect is this identity crisis. That's what we're seeing.
From our side, we don't go above the layer 2, so we absolutely need the ISPs. We rely on you to sell our services, and so absolutely we need you guys.
Maybe let me also comment, because Metro Fiber has direct customers, as the room knows. Nevertheless, what you are saying is absolutely crucial. We need the ISPs, and I think the two layers that got explained are very, very clearly defined, and we stick to those layers as well. And we see the ISPs as our main go-to market, clearly. And if we would achieve the uptake that we require to make our investment cases work, we would not go directly to market. But it is also reality that the first 20 to 30% of penetration is relatively easy to get, and everyone sells in fresh areas. Every ISP goes to the fresh area because it's easy to get customers. When you have the 30%, but for your business case, for your payback, for your ability to invest fresh money in fresh areas, you need in your build areas an uptake of 40 to 50%, and no ISP goes there because it's hard work, then that's what we are doing. And I mean, of course, Frogfoot is very clear, but there is a big brother somewhere. Octo is also very clear. There's another brother or sister. So let's be honest, I don't think that what we are doing is so unnatural, but it's also very, very clear we need the ISPs, for sure.
Just don't forget that we're also dealing with mobile operators with very significant FTTH footprints that do have a direct-to-consumer model that don't really follow this. And if they weren't so damn bad at actually selling, they would be eating our breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We're very fortunate that they're so useless at actually selling proper ISP services, because otherwise I think this industry would be in serious trouble.
Thank you. And?
Thanks. Ant Brooks from ISPA. I have a question for the panelists. What one thing would you like to see government, by government I mean policymakers, regulators, what would you like to see government do, or perhaps stop doing, that would make it easier for you to roll out new fibre services to South Africans?
think the biggest operational stumbling block for us is local government in terms of getting permission to actually roll out. That delays the whole process. To me, that's the critical thing they can get right to get some efficiencies in that process. Yeah, that will speed up our rollouts across the country.
In very short, way leaves and security is probably the two main points.
So just if I can just interrupt. There is a national standard bylaw. It was commissioned by the offices of the presidency through Operation Will and Leila. And that's, we've been involved quite fortunately that we've been able to be involved there, and we've been working with a few municipalities. I think we also just got, was it, Tom just helped me, was it Mossel Bay? Just leveraged off of that standard model bylaw to publish a new bylaw. So there's traction there. There's a rapid deployment policy. There's a national standard bylaw. So there's lots of initiatives from national government to assist local government. The extent to which there's traction will obviously depend on a local body, but at least there's been some initiative from government in that regard.
Yeah, Anton, I know that you guys were involved, and I think it's a lovely idea, but let me maybe share a comment somebody shared with me from a presentation that the Indian regulator gave at the NWC in Barcelona. And the comment is that India managed to get down their way leave process from, let me get it here, sorry, I'm just looking for it, but they managed to get their way leave process down to a matter of weeks from 18 plus months. They actually took, in terms of the Indian 5G rollout, and yes, it was a mobile rollout, but the same applies. They actually took things seriously. You know, how long has this model bylaw been in place? Where is it imposed? Where have we actually seen anything change? You know, it's nice, but respectfully, it's not even 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. It's like a stumble forwards, and then you land up with things like the construction mafias and the power issues and the water issues, then actually pushing you 5 meters backwards. So nice to have, but no actual real indication of a government that's actually serious about getting infrastructure deployed. The other thing is real action in terms of direct infrastructure access. Now, I'm not a big fan of over-regulation, but at the same time, the fact that our industry is having to overbuild is sometimes greed, sometimes stupid business models, and sometimes because they can't get access to appropriate shared infrastructure at appropriate levels. And again, the authority has been taking great pot shots at the mobile operators as if they are the devil incarnate, but ignoring that ultimately the opening infrastructure is the key element. And so there's little incentive. I haven't seen, again, I don't work that much in South Africa, but I haven't seen a real fix in terms of ICASA's processes around facilities sharing. I really think that if they want to be serious, this actually needs more than just more talk and models. It actually needs something to be shoved down the throats of local, provincial, and national government, and it needs operators working together rather than paying lip service to building infrastructure. I don't know if anybody's going to the infrastructure summit next week. Should be fun. I expect yet another talk shop.
It's Willem from Backspace. I just want to pose a question to you guys. Why do you guys normally, when you do these free bandwidth upgrades, go very social with it, but when you do price increases, you expect the ISP to share that bad news to the customers?
Thank you.
Hi, Joe. So it's about 10 years, I think, since the FTTH revolution sort of started. The question is about looking forward. So when are we going to see 10 gig services? The general sentiment I pick up is that you guys are pretty negative about your business models. So I'm wondering, are we at the end of the road of the price increases? Do you think it's sustainable now? And how soon can we start making some progress, making things better?
I mean, I can't speak commercially because I'm not commercially involved, but I can speak to trends I've been seeing over the years. And I mean, Willem made a point around the 20,000 Rand a month where you were buying from Telkom, because we come from a point where there was a monopoly that could charge what it wanted to. And we all know in the history, CCOM came and it was hailed as the next sort of like breakthrough to cost reductions, and we saw cost reductions coming down and down and down and down. It can't go on forever. Every business costs money to support. It must, at some point, reach a rock bottom, and from there it will start going up inflationary. My panelists can tell us whether they think we're there or not. But we can't, we were used to a deflationary environment for a long time because we were in a demonopolized, liberalized environment. But that was never going to be a forever trend.
We are very bullish, honestly, about the future, and we are very positive about the business model that we have. I think the discussion this started was questions around pricing, right? And that it's very bad that we increase prices as FNOs. I believe we are bullish about it because there are huge opportunities still. I mean, we saw it yesterday, the comparison between internet access via mobile versus fixed. And I think there's still room to increase the fixed side significantly. I believe there are a lot of areas that are untapped still. We believe in FTTB as well from a fiber point of view. So we are actually quite bullish about the future. I think it's just, we should just not be so focused on one topic, which is pricing going down instead of pricing in a reasonable way, going up over time, like any other industry. It's not different from any other utility, from any other insurance, from any other entertainment. I mean, why not? And I believe if we can turn this mental thing around from telco prices have to go down to reasonably go up, I believe the future is very bright and investment cases can work. Reality is this year is I think we all realize this, that the build program slowed down, and why is that? It is because I believe the paybacks are not as they should have been or were anticipated. And to be also honest, for us at least, interest rates are weighing quite heavily on us and on the capital that we have deployed. So this combination of the realization that maybe uptake is not as big as we thought or fast as we thought, and interest rates is currently cooling down the industry, I believe. But we are very clear, consolidation must happen. We want to be part of that, and we want to continue to invest. So it's not negative at all on our side.
Sorry, I found the slide that I was looking for to respond to Ant, but I think it touches here as well. So these are some of the interventions. Okay, this is on towers, but and clearance easing and wireless permissions for towers, 90 days to instant. Simple application and time-bound permission for usage of street furniture. So if you want to hang fiber on street poles, making use of existing street furniture, a portal to streamline right-of-way permissions, and the key, right-of-way permissions reduced from 52 weeks to 2 weeks. Now, if you could change that in South Africa, and you could change the security issues that have been spoken about, you could significantly reduce the costs that FNOs have to incur to actually deploy and maintain their networks. And that could really give a kickstart to help slow down price increases. I'm inclined to agree. You can't expect pricing in an infrastructure business where you've got to pay O&M going forward. You can't expect pricing to go down in this space, but you can certainly slow the increase that we're seeing. My perception is that the increases are slowing down. Things are normalizing. But one of the key elements has got to be, how do you reduce costs? And some of those are these additional incremental costs that are imposed on top of F&Os that were also not really baked into business cases at the beginning.
Can I go first? I'm going to take a different slant here. So I think we're already starting to run out of runway in terms of how much you can push the speed with the current pricing structures. Because fiber is an ultimate technology, it's unlimited to some extent. The current inflection point is around a gig, right? Looking at it idealistically, where we would want to get is that most consumers actually have access to higher speeds and actually have that unlimited capability that's reliable and faster than what you currently can get. It's a bit of a crystal ball question, really. At what point will the train tracks that we've laid be deployed for high-speed services from other technologies? I think we're ready for that. But in terms of pushing the price, I think we have, you can see it, we've eroded the entry level. It's flat at the 500 Rand point. And if you look at the difference between the speeds from there up to a gig now, it's not a big difference.
I want to reiterate a question, actually, that Joe asked, which is, what do you guys think about 10 gig? And when will we see that? And then one of those things that Cory Doctorow calls a ramble and then a what about that? I'm going to just wanted to point this out. Access, love you, Franco, launched a Vodacom resale package recently. We wrote about it this morning. And to Alan's earlier point about Vodacom being the most expensive and bad and all that, that's 299 Rand, uncapped, 50 gig FUP. When you hit the FUP, you go down to 2 meg. And up to 20 meg service, right? So it's slower than the entry-level suburban fiber networks. The high-density fiber networks have a 20 meg service, but not in the leafy suburbs. But it's an interesting one where we're seeing, I don't know if this is a cyclical thing, where we're seeing the mobile operators come in at much lower price because they've got all this fancy new spectrum. But we've also seen this movie before, where they launch uncapped stuff and the network saturates and it falls over. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. This is just another one of those pricing pressures on the ISPs that are not offering services like this, and an incentive for them to start offering stuff like this and not sell fiber, because there might be higher uptake on products like these. So what do you think about that?
Well, as a consumer, not a technologist, 10 gig sounds amazing. Who can use it? Yeah, love you, Joe. Even my service. Until I cabled my house, it was barely usable. So it doesn't matter what you put in, seeing as most people are going to be using Wi-Fi. You're subject to the capabilities of whatever hardware you put into the house. So how many people are lunatics like me and are actually willing to spend the extra money to actually go and get somebody to run cable through to APs around their house so that they actually get a seamless experience? I would suspect not that many, which means that you can offer 10 gig, but it ultimately is just a marketing gimmick. And very few consumers will use it, which is great, because then you can oversell the shit out of that network on the basis that it's a 10 gig it's a 10 gig network, and some idiot who needs to buy the fastest and the best will buy it, but actually they're not going to use it. Very few people will actually land up using even a gig service. Is unlikely to be used, but that's fantastic, because then you can just contend your network to your heart's content. and charge a premium for it.
Can I maybe ask a question on the uncapped offer? Is this really what we want to do to our consumers, to call a service that goes down from whatever megs to 1 or 2 megs after a certain period? Do we really want to call this uncapped? I thought this time is over. Uncapped unlimited is uncapped unlimited. It's not capping. I mean, you drive with an Uber, and after 5 kilometers, it slows down to 1 kilometer per hour, and then, no, but it's not capped. I'm still rolling. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, so I think, and maybe you want to pick up on this, but you know, the issue is in terms of how you market things, is a debate which our regulator has not actually stood up to and has not taken on. So it's been left to what used to be the Advertising Standards Authority. I forget their new name, but yeah, that sounds extremely odd. So they have some views in terms of how you can market things. They engaged ISPA. They got some advice from ISPA in terms of uncapped, unlimited, how that can go through. We all understand that there is a need for some sort of fair usage policy, and you know, unless somebody actually takes this on, or a regulator is willing to take it on other than the advertising regulator, then consumers will buy into that bullshit. Well, you keep raising this question about, do we want to do this to our consumers? We need to inform them of the benefits of fiber, how to take that forward. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is, you know, there used to be an association called the FTTH Council, which then changed its name to the FTTX Council. And that's now morphed into the Digital Council Africa and is now doing far more important things than actually worrying about fiber. So the key question is, who's going to be telling consumers this? Because if you're asking us as ISPs to actually dip into our pockets to pay for marketing, we're going to tell you to screw off because our margins are paper thin. So who's going to actually go to the consumers and preach the fiber benefit, because the FTTH Council no longer exists, and they're now far more interested in much weightier issues. So who actually preaches the fiber message? Who's going to tell people about the benefits of a high fiber diet?
And to just throw this out there, it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek jab, but it had to be done, to what you're up against in terms of marketing there. MTN put out an ad during the Rugby World Cup, I don't know how many of you saw it, where they were essentially inferring that fiber goes down and 5G stays up. It was very funny, but that's how you sink a message into people's brains. You make it funny, you make them laugh at it. It's like, oh yeah, fiber's unreliable and 5G is better. Like that absolutely has to be countered with also get Siya Kolisi in and do an ad to say the exact opposite, because we know it's not true. Yeah, this is the kind of marketing stuff that's out there and that the fiber industry is up against. By the way, the reason I said it was a tongue-in-cheek jab is because I asked MTN about what Supersonic thinks about their ad.
Did you get an answer? You're still waiting.
I got an answer. It was very much, we were just having some fun. You know, it's just a bit of fun marketing. We were having a good time. Blah blah blah.
Not to mention that those 5G towers are backhauled by fiber. So.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Thank you, attendees, for the questions. It's now time for a tea break, so we'll meet back here at 10:30. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.